Section 1, and it's all about the First Amendment in the Constitution. And the big idea here is that the Constitution of the United States establishes and protects fundamental rights and liberties that we have as citizens. And so as we understand First Amendment, some terms that you'll see: civil liberties, censorship, petition, slander, and libel. And so free speech is kind of the thrust of the First Amendment, but there's a lot to it, as you can see. And so some terms we'll operate off of, like media. The media exists because of the First Amendment, and they have the right to interpret it and exercise it just like we do. And so absolutely, Americans should have the right to express their ideas about the government and to the government. And it's a fundamental aspect of the United States and our civil liberties. And so the First Amendment was added so that basic freedoms would be guaranteed. It is essential to the functionings of our democracy to have the right to exercise free speech. The First Amendment specifically details our civil liberties. And by civil liberties, I mean those freedoms to think and act without government interference or fear of illegal treatment. You have the right to believe what you would like. You have the right to express what you would like. And the government does not have the right to interfere in that. We don't have a state religion, because if we did, it would be a violation of our civil liberties, because we don't all share the same religion. If we did, that would violate freedom of thought. Again, our civil liberties, that's where it starts. And that means freedom of religion. Believe what you want, or don't. It's your business. Freedom of speech. Say what you want without fear of reprisal. Of course, the limit there is when what you say is hurting someone. You know, the essence of liberalism means that if you're causing no harm, you're okay. Freedom of the press. The press is an important safeguard for democracy. Now, granted, they don't all report the news the same way. You've got to filter through media and filter through bias just the way that you do in dealing with people. But the press report information. Again, the information may not always be accurate. It may be loaded with bias, and you have a responsibility to interpret media that you consume in a responsible way. But it's an important aspect of a democracy that the press be allowed to function. And then, of course, freedom of assembly. This means that we have the right to peacefully assemble and discuss whatever we want. You know, if you would like to hold a meeting and talk about your grievances with the school, whatever, it's your right to do so. And you have the freedom to petition. Meaning that if you are truly unhappy about a situation, you have more rights than just to complain about it. You have the right to do something about it, to seek peaceful redress, to fix it. You know, the people of Missouri were unhappy that they didn't have the right to join unions that could collectively bargain for better conditions for workers. It was called right to work laws because the people that were pushing for that law didn't want unions to have the right to push for better conditions. And so they named it this catchphrase to sell the idea. The people of Missouri put a stop to it. Okay, so the freedom of religion, or even the freedom from religion, however you want to phrase it, is called the Establishment Clause to the United States Constitution. It states that Congress shall make no ruling regarding the establishment of a religion or prohibit the free exercise thereof. I say it all the time because we don't have a state religion. We don't try to control your thoughts, but we also don't try to prevent you from having a religion or prevent you from having whatever thoughts you may choose.
You're not allowed to think in America.
It means that we have a separation of church and state. It doesn't mean that our state is atheist communist trying to destroy religion. No, it doesn't mean that at all. Quite the opposite. It means that our state does not endorse or condemn any particular faith, and you're free to live your life the way you choose. It means that the two bodies are inherently separate. There's the business of religion over here. There's the business of state functions and public life over here. It means you are free to practice your faith or lack thereof as you wish. It's just not the business of the state. It's your personal business. Meaning that as a servant of the state, as a state employee, it would be a breach of the Establishment Clause for me to endorse or teach a particular religion. Ergo, we talk about religion all the time in social studies, but I don't teach a particular religion. There's a key difference there. Because if I did, then I would be using state public funds, my salary, state public funds. I would be using that, in addition to the building and the facilities, to push a particular belief. And that's, that's grounds for my dismissal as a violation of the Establishment Clause. And so that means that we do not have a state religion. There is no specific one favored by the government. Okay, let's unpack freedom of speech a little bit. This means we're free to say what is on our minds. Again, there's limits. You don't yell fire in a crowded room. That's inciting a panic. It could hurt people. You don't yell shark at the beach because, someone's going to hurt someone trying to escape the beach. But if you want to say that someone in power is a doo-doo head, whatever. It's not very productive to say that. It's more productive to say I have this specific problem with this person's ideas or their character. But again, say what you want. Obviously, the internet has provided a whole new aspect of speech for us to interpret and try to figure out. But when you begin to think about what sorts of things are online, and that those things exist through the freedom of speech, well, then you begin to realize just how broad this right to free speech is. Clothing is a form of expression. And as long as you're not violating public decency laws, then, again, because the limits of your civil liberties are where you're hurting someone else. All right, freedom of the press. You have the right to express yourself in writing. That means you post something online like, so-and-so in power is a bad person. Well, they have no right to go after you for saying that. Just think about, the freedom to express yourself in print. Think about the crazy things that people say online. and how nothing can really be done about it because they have the right to express themselves in print as freedom of the press. And this means that obviously when you go online, you see a diversity of viewpoints, unless you just filter everyone that disagrees with you out. But you see a diversity of viewpoints. We don't have a state media. And that's powerful because this freedom prevents government censorship. And that means the banning of printed materials or films due to alarming or offensive ideas. It's extremely important that not only we value this right, but that we exercise this right. But of course, that means that the internet is an unvetted place. It means the things that you see may or may not be true. It also means that as responsible citizens, you have the responsibility to fact check. It's simpler than ever these days. Okay, let me bring in particular cases here. The Zenger case. A publisher of the New York Weekly Journal was arrested once for writing an article criticizing the governor of New York. It was brought to trial. The publisher was acquitted, meaning that he was not punished in any way because he was exercising his right of free speech of the press to report his opinions in print. And so the Zenger case is regarded as a landmark case. It established the precedent that we have the freedom of speech in writing in the press. Let's unpack the freedom of assembly. This allows you guys to gather peacefully in groups. Now, there's a difference between violently in groups. That Charlottesville was advertised as a peaceful assembly. But it obviously wasn't, right? Because people began bringing weapons, and then before you knew it, someone drove a car into the crowd and tried to kill people. But we have the right to peacefully assemble. And that takes the good with the bad, folks. I don't know if you remember in American history, but when we got to the Red Scare, there was a photograph in your U.S. history book of a giant Klan parade going straight down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. Thousands of them. Well, guess what? You got to take the good with the bad. They were peacefully assembling, granted, hate group. But if we recognize one group's right to peacefully assemble, we have to recognize other groups' right to peacefully assemble. You got to take the good with the bad, because if we start saying, you don't get to assemble because we don't like your ideas, and granted their ideas may be terrible, it doesn't matter. It implies means suggested rather than directly stated, the freedom of association. Meaning that you have the right to associate with different groups or ideas. Next, the freedom to petition. This guarantees that people can petition, which means to make a formal request. A formal request. Essentially, we are the government. When you start complaining about the government, you have to realize that we are the government. We are the people. If we have a problem, we have a responsibility to fix it. That's how democracy is meant to work. If none of us care, if we all trust to experts to fix our problems for us, the government fails because we don't care. Again, that's how it's meant to work. Because we're not just supposed to complain, which granted, we have the right to complain, and we do an awful lot of it, right? But we're meant to try to fix it. We're meant to take those complaints through the proper channels and fix it. I don't know if you heard about the recent removal of Confederate statues at NC State. Did you know that people had been working to peacefully and properly remove those statues since the 1960s? And the state had done nothing, and so finally a mob stormed the campus and removed those statues. Peacefully. It didn't hurt anybody, but they physically removed those statues. Some people are calling it a crime, that they need to be prosecuted. Some people are calling it about time. You can think what you will, and you can, more importantly, express what you want about that without fear of reprisal. Now, of all these freedoms, I think they're all extremely important. They're all in dealing with who you are, what is your identity, how do you choose to express that. But also it's important that we understand there are limits to these things. And the general principle here is that our rights extend to the point where they're not infringing on other people's rights. And so the First Amendment does guarantee certain rights, but there are reasonable limits. You don't have the right to interfere with others. If you want to believe that people with blue shirts are the devil, that's your right to believe that. Okay, you can hold that belief that people with blue shirts are the devil. You can believe that all you want. But you can't go around making people stop wearing blue shirts. There's a big difference there. If you want to believe that certain groups are going to hell for their lifestyles and beliefs, okay. That's your right to hold that belief. No one can take that belief away from you. But you don't have the right to make that person change. Again, your civil liberties extend to the point where you're not interfering with others. And we also have to think about the rights of individuals as balanced with the rights of the community. In the privacy of your own home, if you want to be a nudist, so be it. But you do not have the right to be a nudist in public. Why? Because it violates decency. It violates standing laws about public decency. We don't. It's disrupting the peace. It would certainly be a violation of the Tinker Standard, because how are we supposed to have a productive class if people are naked? Again, the rights of individuals balanced against the rights of the community. And so, for example, you have the right to your personal opinions. You have the right to express those, but there are reasonable limits. For example, you don't have the right to slander. And slander means a spoken untruth that is harmful to someone's reputation. Yeah, did you realize that? The rights of your free speech do not include slander. So, I'm not protected by free speech if I were to whisper, so-and-so's hair is dumb today. Something stupid, yeah. So, that's slander. That's harming their reputation by something I'm saying. Libel is very similar. Libel just means printed untruths. So, cyberbullying is not protected by your right to free speech. So next time you see somebody being a tool online and they throw, and they just say, free speech, y'all, then you can say, not libel. And then they won't know what you're talking about, but you can sound smart, right? So, could there be limits on First Amendment freedoms? I hope you understand that these limits are reasonable. They're not meant to be anything crazy.